was 13. It was a Tuesday after morning. I remember it very vividly. I was in my eighth grade earth science classroom when I found out what happened. I had a seat next to the window. I remember looking out the window and seeing smoke rise from the towers. Where I went to middle school in Flushing, Queens, and even though it's quite a distance from downtown, we could still see the city from my middle school, and we could see the smoke rising from the towers. So I remember that day very vividly. The next day, which was a Wednesday, school was closed. Um, the following day, Thursday, when we came to school, it was early September, so the weather was still nice. When we came to school, the windows of the school were open, and there was a layer of soot uh, all in the classrooms. So when we walked into the classrooms on Thursday morning, there was this ash that was in all of the classrooms. It wasn't a lot of, but it was like a dusting of ash in the classrooms. And so um, I remember 9/11 very, very vividly. I was only a teenager, but you know, you kind of remember those times as being very impactful. My middle school was down the block from the masjid that I grew up at, and now I'm on the board of. And so I remember as I was going home, we saw a lot of people who were non-Muslims standing outside the masjid. Some who were throwing like stones and stuff, but nothing that caused too much damage. Um, when we did come back to school, the Muslim students faced a lot of looks and taunts and something like that. So, we dealt through a lot, but alhamdulillah, we got through it. And so now it's 20 years later, and at that time, I was always interested in law and becoming a lawyer since I was a kid, even before 9/11. But really, 9/11 really solidified uh, my decision to become a lawyer and to help the community, face the challenges that were coming ahead. From faculty and staff, we didn't really notice that much of a difference. I think they were told to not say or do anything. But students, especially middle school and then later on high school students, can be quite cruel. So, we did receive taunts, people who called us terrorists, people who, would give us nasty looks, Muslim girls who would face issues with what's going on in their lives. Um, and so, the Muslim community, it's so the Muslim community deals with a lot. There were, I'll say that those are isolated incidents for the most part. I think the vast majority of my interactions have always been very positive. There have been, you know, to me, they're isolated, isolated occurrences to me, but honestly, obviously in a larger, grand picture of it, this is something that was happening to a lot of Muslim students, uh, particularly to females, particularly girls that wore hijab. They got a lot of nasty looks, and comments and stuff. And I'm 6 foot tall, and am a big guy, and so a lot of people don't want to mess with me, but for others who may not have had such uh, a towering presence over other people, they were picked on. Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a lot of times where friends, non-Muslim friends, when you share with them the struggle that you're going through, they tell you, don't worry about it. This is stuff that a lot of other people are going through as well. Um, so non-Muslim students were very supportive and gave us encouragement to, not think about it and kind of just focus on. Being Muslim impacts my social life quite a lot. I went to college at UMass Amherst, and then I went to law school at UMass Law. While I was at UMass Amherst, you know, my first year of college, I was not active with the Muslim students, and so I had primarily non-Muslim friends, and um, you know being the only Muslim person with non-Muslim friends, you're kind of expected to be an ambassador or a representative of Islam, even if you're, not super confident in your abilities to talk about it yourself. You're kind of the only person, and so there were lots of deep discussions. People who may not have necessarily liked Muslims before, but now they had an opportunity to meet and talk to a Muslim person. So, that really changed a lot of minds. I think more, but in college, there's a lot of students, right? So you're not building like a super deep relationship with a bunch of, a lot of people. When I was in law school, that kind of relationship evolved even more. Again, I was one of the few Muslim students on campus. My school, UMass Law, only had 300 students in the whole school. And so I built a lot more, a lot deeper relationships with my colleagues at school at that time in law school. And so while I was one of the few Muslim kids, I was probably the only practicing Muslim student. And so by the time I was in law school, I was much more confident in my ability to talk. And then um, I would host lots of dinners with my peers, um, just as a way to break bread and get them to understand that Muslims are just normal people, and all because my skin color is darker or I may pray 5 times a day, that doesn't mean that um, I'm not an American. And for me personally, I've always been like super, super proud to be American. So it's really like an interesting feeling, to kind of prove your Americanness, I guess. But it's something that, I've always been super proud to live in America and like, listen to like, there were times where I was in law school and I would be listening to like, renditions of the Star Spangled Banner, for over and over. I mean, it's kind of as a Muslim American, you kind of have to show or prove or be extra proud of being American, because if you're not, then you're like the outsider. It was impacted quite a lot. I mean, obviously, a when that initial shock happened, I think there was a lot of people who didn't understand a lot of stuff. As time has gone on, um, even though Muslims still have a bad name, I think that there are more and more people who are kind of coming around. And also, 20 years ago, the Muslim community looked a lot different than it does now. There were uh, a lot less lawyers, a lot less, and people who are in the space. If, you know, Now there's a lot more people, and there's an entire there's like almost 2 generations of people who have come after. There's people who grew up who are already alive at 9/11 but may not have remembered. And then there's an entire generation of people, maybe even you, that's your age, that never lived through 9/11 and have only seen about it on TV and heard about it in books. And so I think as your generation comes to age, you know in, nowadays, in the next over the next 5-10 years, we're going to see the conversation really get past 9/11. At least I hope. And I think that the Muslim American community has been growing ever stronger, and it has more to offer to our non-Muslim colleagues. Mental health. I think when I was younger, there was no such thing as like mental health, right? So um, it's seeing what happened that day live and seeing the smoke rise from the towers myself with my own eyes, and then coming to school 2 days later and seeing the ash in the school, you know, really made me realize that life was never going to be the same. Uh, we had just experienced kind of like a Pearl Harbor type moment, where America was attacked. And even as a Muslim American, you know, I felt very, very strongly about the need for America to defend itself and to protect us as Americans. I was born in Pakistan, but I came to the United States when I was 2 years old. So I have grown up American, and I am as American as apple pie, even though apple pie is actually a German thing. But in terms of mental health, I think that there's really, and I think this happens to a lot of people. There's usually a moment in your life where you have a choice whether something will make or break you. And I think at that moment you have a choice whether you're going to hide from something, or to take something head on. And I think that was a moment in my life where I realized that nothing would be the same. And I also realized that it was going to be on people like me to explain to non-Muslim Americans that we're just like you guys. We want to make sure we have health and safety and security for our families, and schools for our kids, and food on the table. And so and we're not very different from others. And it took that really solidified my desire to become a lawyer uh, over the long term. I think most people are scared of people they don't know, and I'll tell you, I'm scared of people I don't know. Right. So I think on the side of Muslims, the thing I would say to Muslims is to go out and meet and get to know and spend time with non-Muslim colleagues, peers, friends, associates, etc. And I think that that's even more important to do um, uh, than to hang out with Muslims. I think it's really important for Muslims to go hang out with non-Muslims, and to get to know them and spend time with them. I'll tell you that I've had great relationships over the years with my non-Muslim friends, and to the point where when now Muslim things come up, now my non-Muslim friends will defend me, and will defend Muslims and say, oh, but I know this guy Subhan, and he's a really nice guy, and he sends me all these gifts and stuff. So I know that Muslims aren't like that, and kind of, and to the Muslims, I would say it's really an obligation to us to do more. For instance, like one of the things I try to do is on Eid, I send all of my non-Muslim colleagues gifts on, like baklava or something on Amazon. Um, I send them books throughout the year, like just random times, just send people stuff. And yeah, that'll cost you money, but the relationship that you build on the back end is much more valuable than, a than just a couple of bucks that you would have made. There's a lot of stuff that continues, right? So like for instance, my firm, we handle my normal practice is suing the credit reporting agencies and debt collectors. But my firm, we also handle uh, discrimination cases to some degree. So like for instance, right now we just filed today, actually, or yesterday, and actually today sort of, we just filed an appeal to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in federal court because of for on behalf of a Muslim lady who had her accounts closed wrongfully by People's United Bank. They filed for dismissal, or they filed for summary judgment, and the judge who had never heard her case um, dismissed it, and he did so a year after the briefings, a year after we filed all the paperwork, and without any oral arguments. So I think challenges, the Muslim community is still facing challenges, right, of being kind of this part of this suspect class of people who are just suspected of doing wrong things simply because they are who they are. In this instance, that we're suing the People's United Bank. There's a Muslim lady who had her personal and custodial accounts. So she had an account for herself, and she also had an account for her son. And she started a nonprofit organization called the Mu'min Foundation. She did work in Senegal with schools and helping build a mosque. When she opened the account for the Mu'min Foundation, the bank made a mistake and categorized her account to generate monthly fees, even though it shouldn't have. It should have not generated monthly fees. So she opened the account. She told the bank she was going to be traveling and went to Senegal to do her work. While she was overseas, the Mu'min account went into overdraft because it was generating fees. And when the bank ultimately closed the nonprofit account, but also closed all of her personal accounts. When she was stranded for 4 months in Senegal. When she finally came back, she went to the bank. The bank admitted that they had made a mistake, but they ultimately refused to reopen the accounts based on the countries that she had traveled to. And so we filed a case for discrimination. And it's the challenges that the Muslim community are going through are still going. So it's not like, oh, 9/11 happened, the Muslims went through a bunch of bad stuff and it's over. I think it's an ongoing challenge that Muslims face. It's an ongoing responsibility that we have to stand up for ourselves and to exercise our rights and to be as American as we can be. And I think being a 9/11, I mentioned already, like I knew before 9/11 that I wanted to be a lawyer. I could, as a lawyer, I could go and work at a big corporate firm, but then I won't necessarily have the opportunity to make that impact that I'm looking for. And to me, the money never really mattered about being a lawyer. It's really about making impact in the community. And so, now I have my own practice. I do cases the way I want to do them. And, alhamdulillah, we get to help people. and make some impact and hold some companies to the fire when it comes to to their responsibilities. And so I think that it's really an opportunity to make sure that uh, your generation of people understands that in order for us to continue to make progress, it's going to take young people who are who who care about the impact more than they care about themselves. And what I mean by that is, you know, when I graduated from law school and I was 25 and I got a job working for Barclays, the investment bank. And I worked there for a year and I absolutely hated my job because I wasn't able to have any impact and stuff. And even though they were paying me money, good money, I felt, kind of useless to the community. And so when I started my practice, I my family wasn't too thrilled, but I went from making $10,000 a month to making $600 my first month of having my own practice. But I knew that I wanted to make an impact, and so the short term, money is not really going to matter. And so I would tell, my piece of advice to young people who are at Rutgers who watch this is to care about something else more than you care about yourself and the money, because when you're good at something, the money will come. I've always found that to be the case, that if you care about impact, if you care about professionalism, if you care about doing the right thing, the money is really always around. It'll always come. You'll find it. But if you don't have that kind of guiding principle, that North Star that's really pushing you, then what's going to happen is you're just going to take the easy route and just focus on the money, right? And what happens with that is that even in the short term, you're happy that you have a bunch of money, but 10, 15, 20 years from now, those same people are like depressed because they have no purpose in life. And so I would say, figure out your purpose, figure out what you want to do and why you want to do it, and then create a pathway towards finding that level of success. And it may take time, but I think that it's definitely something that's doable. Yeah, being a lawyer is an amazing thing, and I always really highly recommend it to everyone.